So, I'm going to tell you about this Badger Blade sword. It's an all-steel bastard sword, and I'm a little tipsy. These are some words that might be important if you want to read them more, then pause. For the purpose of the review, we're going to start at the hilt, and what I can tell you about the hilt is that it feels a little round. It's not terribly difficult to feel where the edge is, but I think the hilt felt a little too roundish, and it was also a little slippery in my hands. The simple cord wrap was okay, but I didn't find it terribly comfortable or appealing. Also, as I look at the pommel, it's difficult for me to tell how they're constructed. I don't know if there's a peen somewhere in there that's been sanded down and is difficult to see, or if the pommel is simply welded on. I was also unable to find information about that on the internet, so I guess Google failed me this time. Well, it's still good for porn, though. The blade itself is made out of 1075 steel. I don't really know that for sure, but that's what it says on the internet, and it looks very steely to me. The planes are kind of rough. It wiggles and jiggles, and the lines aren't necessarily straight. The thing is, Badger Blades admits that they're not really trying to reproduce or recreate any particular type of medieval sword. This is their interpretation on a generic type of medieval bastard sword. And for those purposes, it seems shaped about like that. It seems like Badger Blade's intention was to create a sword at a modest price that would be able to beat the shit out of things pretty well, and frankly, I think they've achieved their goal. The standard sheaths that are available for these blades, which I believe are sold separately in general, is basically a big leather tube. Now, the leather is pretty nice, it's thick, and the blade doesn't cut through it, but it's not really finished at the other end. It's a tube, and I found that a little odd. You could poke your finger in there, and if you're really not careful, you could cut your dinger off, I guess. I don't know, it just seems a little meh. The thing is, all of my feelings about the blade are really subjective, so let's just see how it cuts. Now, I'm whacking it into water bottles, and what I'll tell you is it's kind of ripping through them. And this is the most embarrassing part. I whacked it into a water bottle, and it just kind of crumpled it up. Now, I know Badger Blades has got videos where they're cutting steel things in half and whacking it into concrete blocks, and that's all well and good, but it doesn't really cut through a water bottle very well without a lot of momentum. And I had to swing that little SOB pretty hard. Now, in Badger Blade's defense, they call this a chisel tip piece, and it's not really for cutting water bottles per se. They cut things like titanium rings and cinder blocks and car rims, and it holds up and it doesn't get fucked up. But what I personally found is, as a water bottle cutter, it kind of tears through things, and as a sword, I found it kind of difficult to manipulate. It didn't feel like I had a lot of point control. It didn't feel like it was easy to start moving or stop moving, and it felt a lot like dead weight in my hand in comparison to other swords like Albion and Arms and Armor, and hell, even some of the Ronin Katana Euro pieces made this thing, by comparison, feel very uncomfortable. Also, look at that. I just dented the paper. I fucking dented it. I took a good long swing, and I hit a piece of paper, and I dented it. Now, it might just be a chisel tip and not sharp, but fucking seriously. At other angles, the blade worked a little bit better, and I was able to cut in. If I took it at like a 45-degree angle, for example, it was chopping downward into the paper differently. It at least responded, but in every case, it was rather disappointing in comparison to almost every other sword I've ever tested at any point ever. The thing is, what this blade is probably going to be good for is for folks that want to be able to go out and whack trees and have a blade that doesn't function like a sword and doesn't require training, and that you can beat into things and will operate as a crowbar if necessary. And for those purposes, it seems like this may be a very good fit, and I think that there's probably a lot of folks out there that do want that kind of thing. Regrettably, I just don't happen to be one of them. Damn. I'll do a little video on the blade itself so you can see some of the details that I'm talking about outside of just the photos that I shared earlier. Now, first up, this big leather tube sock that I was talking about. You can see that it's open and I can spread it apart, and if I were to poke my finger or penis in there, that it would probably end poorly for me. Now, the blade isn't terribly sharp, so it's not as though you're going to cut yourself on a razor blade or something, but there's still a pointy thing in there that you want to be careful about. It feels a little strange to have an open tip, but I guess, if I'm smashing water bottles with it, at least it drains out, so there's a positive. The leather is of a high quality, and it seems very stable, but I don't know, it seems kind of hokey to me a little bit. That's just my personal opinion, though. In terms of what it's supposed to do, keep a blade on your belt and walk around with it, it functions perfectly fine and does what it's supposed to do, and probably at a pretty minor cost. Frankly, I don't exactly know what they cost, but I'm guessing it's not too terribly much, considering this blade is about $370. Now, the blade itself has this finish to it, which is kind of rough. It's supposed to be that way. Over the course of testing, the blade did not bend, it didn't warp, it didn't get dulled any more than it already kind of was. There's no significant signs of scratching or fucked upness. Now, I didn't take it to a concrete block or really do anything that Badger Blade says that their blades are supposed to be able to do. I did a much more minor test, but it still held up very well, and I'll give it that. The next question is it worth $370? And the answer, in short, is kind of, sort of. At least it's not a ripoff. That's the quick answer. The long answer is I feel a little bit bad about Badger Blades and what I've said about them thus far. I talk about how it feels like dead weight, and I talk about how it doesn't cut very well. But the simple fact is, if you look at their website, they outline the sword that they're trying to make. And this is the sword they're trying to make. They're a very self-aware company, and they're not trying to make a sword that everyone else makes. They're trying to make their own thing and their own interpretation of it. So for me to stand here or rather sit here and talk into a microphone and bitch about it is not necessarily fair. I'm holding it to a standard that other swords have set, and that's not really the game that they're trying to play. Admittedly, though, it is still a sword, and I still expect some things like a sword. And if that's what you're expecting too, I think it's going to fall short. However, if you want something that you can go into the backyard, whack into metal bricks and cement things and whack into trees, I think this is a solid option. I hope you found this video at least mildly entertaining, or at least kind of informative. If you did, great. Thanks for watching. If you didn't, well, I'll try harder next time.